There were 12 men in suits, one tray of untouched tea, and a single voice no one expected to matter. Top floor, 68th. Glass walls, marble floors, and a boardroom polished so clean, you could see your own fear in the reflection. At the head of the table sat Mr. Zhou Min, the Chinese billionaire whose silence spoke louder than most people's screams. And when he finally did speak, it was in Mandarin. Rapid, sharp, cold. No translator showed up. No one at the table understood him. Not one of the executives dared to open their mouth. Except her. She was just the maid. Gray uniform. No badge. No voice. Supposedly. But the moment Zhou raised his voice in frustration, she replied. In perfect Mandarin. And the room, the company, the future, they all shifted. She wasn't invited to the meeting. She wasn't supposed to be part of this room. But she had heard everything, and now they had no choice but to hear her. Jacqueline's hands didn't shake, not even as she opened the double glass doors to the top floor boardroom of Wentech International, carrying a tray with 12 cups of steaming jasmine tea. She had done this 100 times before. Same tray, same cups, same elevator ride up 68 floors where she wasn't supposed to speak, only serve. But today something felt wrong. The moment she stepped inside, the air hit her like a wall. Thick, stale, electrified. A dozen men in dark suits sat around a brutalist blackwood table, their necks stiff in tension, ties pulled a little too tight. Behind them, skyscrapers framed in floor-to-ceiling glass reminded everyone in the room just how high they'd climbed and how far they could fall. At the head of the table sat Mr. Zhou Min, the billionaire, the ghost, the man who never gave interviews. Today he was here in person, lean, expressionless, immaculately dressed in a high-collared black suit, and he hadn't said a single word. Yet. Jacqueline moved quietly along the side, setting the tray on the serving counter. She wasn't even supposed to be in this room. The regular maid called out sick, and Jacqueline, only a temp from the staffing agency, had been pulled in last minute. She was told, don't make eye contact, don't speak, don't touch the table, don't be noticed. As she placed the last teacup down, something caught her eye. A silver pen had rolled to the floor just by the foot of Mr. Greenwell, one of the American execs. Without thinking, she bent down and picked it up, gently setting it back near his notepad. Don't! A voice snapped. She turned her head. It was Carol, one of the assistants. White blouse, red lipstick, tight smile. You're here to serve tea. Not to touch anything else, she hissed, not even looking up. Jacqueline blinked. Sorry, she whispered, backing away. No one said thank you. No one acknowledged her, but they all heard. And now they all knew. The maid spoke. She stepped back into the shadow of the wall, face calm but chest burning. Then Mr. Zhou leaned forward and spoke. Rapid-fire Mandarin like a machine gun wrapped in velvet. His tone was calm, but each word sliced through the boardroom like a blade. No one moved. No one responded. Jacqueline felt a knot twist in her stomach. The translator hadn't shown up. She could see it on their faces, panic behind perfectly rehearsed smiles. They understood nothing, and none of them spoke Chinese. I thought you said he'd speak through an interpreter, one exec whispered to another. He always does. I don't know what's happening. Maybe it's a test? Or maybe this is his answer. They turned to each other, fumbling, sweating. One man actually reached for Google Translate on his phone, then thought better of it. And through it all, Mr. Zhou kept speaking. Calmly, sharply, authoritatively. He wasn't asking, he was declaring. Jacqueline understood every word. 5 years ago, she worked as a kitchen helper in Guangzhou, lived with a family, learned fast, learned deep. She never used it since, not in this country. But now every syllable was crystal clear. This company is bloated. This proposal is offensive. You insult me by thinking I don't understand your terms. If no one speaks now, we will not speak again. Then he stopped. Silence. Mr. Zhou slowly looked around the room. 12 executives, frozen like mannequins in an apocalypse. And Jacqueline standing by the wall, teacup still in her hand. He narrowed his eyes. Shui neng ting dong. Who understands me? No one moved. No one spoke. Until Jacqueline did. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a bell. I do, sir. The entire boardroom turned. 12 suits. One assistant. All eyes on the maid. She felt the heat crawl up her spine, but her chin stayed high. Joe's gaze locked onto her like a hawk, spotting motion in a dead forest. 你说中文? You speak Chinese? She nodded, then answered him, in Mandarin. 我在扬州住了5年. I lived in Guangzhou for 5 years. His eyes didn't blink. He tilted his head, studied her. The room held its breath. Then Joe said, Translate everything I just said, word for word. Jacqueline stepped forward. Her hands didn't shake. The room didn't breathe. Joe Min leaned back slowly, folding his arms as Jacqueline stepped toward the table, still in her maid uniform, still holding a teacup. I will translate, she said again, this time in calm, fluent Mandarin. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands were steady, but inside her chest was a drumline of panic. She repeated everything he'd said, word for word. This company is bloated. This proposal is offensive. You insult me by thinking I don't understand your terms. If no one speaks now, we will not speak again. She translated it so smoothly the men at the table didn't know what to do first. Apologize, justify, or fire someone. Mr. Green, the senior executive, cleared his throat and offered a plastic smile. Well, thank you for assisting, miss. Jacqueline, she said. Jacqueline, yes. Listen, that was impressive, he said, glancing nervously at Joe. But I think we're waiting for our official interpreter. He's just delayed. No, he's not, Joe said in Mandarin. Jacqueline translated instantly. He's not delayed. He's not coming. I had him dismissed yesterday. Gasps, a cough, a dropped pen. Joe raised a single finger and began speaking again. This time his words were faster, sharper. He walked as he spoke, slowly like a tiger circling prey. Jacqueline translated without missing a beat. Every technical phrase, every metaphor. She wasn't just repeating, she was performing. Rebuilding the meeting from rubble. Joe's voice. The deal you brought me is built on arrogance. You assumed I would be dazzled by numbers and English charm? Jacqueline's voice. You offered me a dinner menu and called it strategy. I eat power for breakfast. It landed like a slap. Somebody exhaled. Someone else checked their watch like it might save them. Carol, the assistant in the red lipstick, leaned toward Green and whispered too loudly, Are we seriously letting her run this meeting? Green waved her off. She's just repeating what he says. Carol scoffed, loud enough for Jacqueline to hear. But Jacqueline didn't flinch. She translated Joe's next line. You came here expecting a language barrier. You didn't expect a mirror. That's when it happened. The third executive on the left, Kaufman, leaned forward. Miss, he said, addressing Jacqueline for the first time like a human, not a piece of furniture. How long have you worked here? Her pause was surgical. 8 days. And you speak Mandarin fluently? Yes. Then why are you a maid? That question didn't belong to this boardroom. It belonged to something deeper, darker, older. And Jacqueline felt it land. Joe didn't speak. The other execs looked away. She looked Kaufman dead in the eye. Because no one ever asked what else I could do. Silence again. The room was cracking. She could feel it. But the cracks hadn't reached the foundation. Yet. Joe turned his back to the group and walked to the window, looking out over the skyline. He said something in Mandarin slowly, as if tasting each word. She translated, Let's get to the truth, shall we? What followed wasn't business. It was blood. Joe began listing internal flaws in the American team's proposal. Errors, oversights, backdoor clauses that no one thought he'd catch. They panicked. Jacqueline translated every detail. Somebody tried to interrupt. She held up a hand. This part you'll want to hear, she said. No one moved. At one point, Joe said something too fast and Jacqueline paused. She asked for clarification in Mandarin. He responded with a curt nod corrected himself, and kept going. The dynamic had flipped. She was no longer the maid who speaks. She was the bridge, the axis, the one person in the room both sides needed to keep this from burning down. Carol stood up suddenly, flustered. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "We shouldn't be relying on staff for executive negotiations." Joe turned his head. One look. She sat down immediately. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. That maid now had more power in this room than all of them combined. And then he said something different, something dangerous. A phrase in Mandarin, low and deliberate, with a venom that Jacqueline hadn't heard before. Not in a boardroom. She froze. Everyone stared. "Translate," said Green. Her voice was quieter now. He says, "The person who planted the sabotage is sitting at this table, and she's wearing red lipstick." Every face turned to Carol. The room blew open with noise. Voices raised, accusations, denials. Joe didn't blink. Jacqueline didn't move. But inside, she knew. She had just stepped into something bigger than a translation job. The room had detonated without sound. Carol sat frozen, lips parted like she might explain, but nothing came out. The red lipstick that had once announced control now looked like a warning label. No one spoke. Even the air pulled back. Joe Min turned from the window and walked slowly toward the table. His footsteps echoed like a countdown. And Jacqueline? She stood still. Not shaking, not smiling, just translating the truth. "She used your names," Joe said in Mandarin. Jacqueline relayed it, her voice low but unflinching. "She forged 3 internal approvals last week. That's how the numbers looked better than they were." Carol jumped up. "That's a lie." Joe tilted his head. "Tell them to check the timestamp metadata on the files," he said. Jacqueline translated. Someone opened a laptop. Another exec dialed legal, then the emails appeared. 3 of them, sent after midnight, routed through a VPN. All of them signed, approved, Green. Green stared at his name like it was written in blood. Carol tried to step back, but the room closed around her like a trap. "You can't prove it was me," she snapped. Joe stepped forward. He said one sentence. "Not in Mandarin, in English. Clear, sharp. You're already proven." No one expected that. Jacqueline didn't need to translate. The message hit clean. Carol left the room before anyone could tell her to. Now the table was missing one chair, and suddenly no one looked comfortable in theirs. Jacqueline didn't move from her spot. She was still in uniform, still holding a folded napkin in one hand. But now, all eyes were on her. And Joe? He just sat. Crossed his legs. Took a sip of tea like none of this surprised him. He looked at Jacqueline and said, "What do you think of their offer?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" He repeated it in Mandarin, then again in English. I said, "What do you think of their offer?" She looked at the room full of executives, at the table full of trembling hands and half-finished spreadsheets. And for the first time all day, she smiled. "It's built on fear," she said, "not vision." Joe nodded slowly, then turned to the rest. "She's right," he said. "Fear doesn't scale. Vision does." The room shifted, like tectonic plates, like someone had just redrawn the map and no one had noticed. One of the investors, silent until now, leaned forward. He was older, heavy-set, with reading glasses halfway down his nose. "I'd like to ask something," he said carefully. To her. To Jacqueline. All heads turned. "Why are you a maid?" She looked at him, at the question, at the simplicity of it. And this time her answer came not just in words, but in something deeper. "Because I needed the job," she said. "Because I don't have a business degree, because no one ever cared what I knew, only what I wore." A pause. "But I never stopped listening. I never stopped learning, and I never forgot how to translate truth." The man nodded slowly. Joe stood up, pushed his chair in with military precision, and said something no one expected. "She's not a maid," he said. Jacqueline looked over, startled. He continued. "She's the only one who understood what this meeting was actually about." Then he turned and walked to the door. "Jacqueline," he said, without turning back, "come see me after this. We have more to discuss." The boardroom emptied slowly. One by one, they left, like people walking out of a courtroom after a verdict. The sun had shifted across the sky. The tea had gone cold. But something else had started to rise. Jacqueline stood alone now. Same gray uniform, same hands. But nothing about her felt the same. She wasn't the maid anymore. She was the memory no one would forget. The line no one saw coming. The language they never bothered to learn, spoken back to them with fire. The next morning, Jacqueline came in early. She wore the same uniform. Pressed, clean, ordinary, and completely misleading. She wasn't supposed to be on the schedule that day. Maid services rotate, temps disappear. That's how it works. People like her show up, serve quietly, and vanish like they were never there. But she'd gotten a call late the night before. "Mr. Joe wants to see you." Alone. She didn't sleep. How could she? Her mind was racing through everything, what he might want, what he might offer, what it could all mean. When she stepped into the private elevator, the security guard did a double take. "You're cleared for the executive floor?" She didn't answer, just nodded. The doors opened. The hallway was silent. Clean. Powerful. His office was behind a pair of massive black lacquered doors with no handle. They opened from the inside. They did now. Joe was standing by the window again, facing the skyline. Same black suit, same posture. But something was different. "Jacqueline," he said without turning. She stepped in. The doors closed behind her. He didn't waste time. "You knew everything I was saying yesterday," he said. "Yes, sir." "You translated with precision, but also intent." She stayed quiet. That's rare. Still quiet. Then he turned and looked at her, directly. His eyes were unreadable, like staring into a locked vault. "I'm not interested in maids who surprise me," he said. "I'm interested in minds that are underused, forgotten, ignored." Jacqueline swallowed. She felt heat rise in her throat. "I want to offer you a role," Joe said. She blinked. "Doing what?" "Chief Liaison, Language and Strategy. You'd work under me, directly. You'd sit in meetings, interpret power, not just language." It didn't feel real. Not yet. And yet every part of her that had been silent for years suddenly sat up and paid attention. "I'd need training," she said. "You'll get it." "I'd need to stop cleaning floors." "You already did," Joe replied. There was a long pause. She could feel the weight of the offer pushing against every part of her identity that had been told no for decades. And yet, her stomach twisted. "Why now?" she asked. "Why me?" Joe didn't blink. "Because when everyone else froze, you spoke." The next day, it spread like fire. Whispers, glares, half-heard conversations in the elevator. "You hear about the maid?" "She's not a maid anymore." "Mr. Zhou promoted her?" "That can't be real." "I think she speaks Chinese." "I think she's dangerous." It wasn't celebration, it was suspicion. Jacqueline walked into the break room and the room went silent. Even the janitor looked away. People didn't see her promotion. They saw disruption, an uninvited rewrite of the social rules they all depended on. You don't jump the line. You don't break the script. You don't make executives uncomfortable in their own language. Later that afternoon, she walked past Carol's now empty assistant desk. But something stopped her. A whisper behind her. Low male. "You think you're safe?" She turned. One of the junior execs, Chambers, stood by the copy machine, arms crossed. "You embarrassed the board," he said. "We all had to answer for that." She said nothing. "You think Zhou will protect you forever?" She kept walking, but his last words followed her down the hall. "You don't belong here. Just because you can translate doesn't mean you can lead." She sat at her new desk that night long after the floor emptied. The city lights blinked below. The skyline she once only cleaned behind was now outside her window. But she wasn't celebrating, she was calculating. because something bigger was coming. Monday morning, a.m. sharp. Jacqueline stood in front of the executive strategy room, room 714. She wasn't on the calendar, wasn't on the list, wasn't even supposed to know the meeting was happening. But she knew. She knew because someone had slipped. A printed agenda left behind in the printer tray with one line that didn't belong. Agenda Item 3. Reconsideration of unauthorized internal promotion. Joe Jacqueline. They were coming for her. Not through confrontation, not through honesty, but through the oldest corporate weapon, the meeting you're not invited to. Jacqueline knocked once. Firm. No response. So she pushed the door open. 6 board members sat inside. Quiet, composed. Joe was not there. One man, Chambers, the one from the hallway, spoke first. "You're not on this calendar, Ms. Price." She stepped forward. "No, but I am on the payroll." They exchanged glances. Mild amusement, mild discomfort. Chambers cleared his throat. "This is a private session." "No, this is about me," she cut in. "And I'm not leaving while you all decide my future like I'm a line item." They didn't expect her to fight. They expected her to vanish. They expected her to know her place. But she had already erased it. The woman at the end of the table, Blake, one of the older board members, leaned forward. "We're concerned about precedent," she said calmly. "Hiring from cleaning staff into strategic roles is highly irregular." Jacqueline smiled thinly. So is speaking Mandarin in an all-English meeting and expecting global investors to nod along. Blake didn't respond. Chambers folded his hands. "You bypassed protocol. There are internal ladders for a reason." Jacqueline tilted her head. "Tell me, when's the last time you promoted someone who didn't look like you?" Silence. 1 year, she said. 3? 5? Chambers' jaw twitched. "You're overstepping," he muttered. "No," she said. "I'm just finally stepping in." The door opened behind her. Joe entered, slow and silent, like a judge arriving to a verdict he already knew. He looked around the table, then at Jacqueline. "I'm late," he said. "What did I miss?" Chambers stood. "We're discussing the implications of your decision, this restructuring." Joe nodded. "Then you should know," he said, eyes scanning the room. "It's no longer a discussion." He placed a folder on the table. Jacqueline Price is now Chief Liaison Officer for Global Strategy. Her promotion has been ratified. By me. Blake shifted. "With respect, Mr. Joe, that's exactly how we do it now," Joe interrupted. "Unless you'd like to explain to our shareholders why the most successful negotiation we've had in 2 years was made possible by someone you tried to fire." Chambers' face flushed. Joe turned to Jacqueline. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "Just for her. You'll outwork every one of them." Then louder to the room. "And if anyone here believes this company should not reward intelligence, regardless of uniform, please say so now." No one said a word. Later that afternoon, Jacqueline walked past her old cleaning closet. She paused, opened it, looked inside. Bleach, mops, towels, the past. She closed the door, slowly, and walked away. At the end of the week, she stood again at the head of a boardroom table, this time in a tailored blazer, no tray, no teacups, no need to justify her presence. One of the junior analysts smiled awkwardly and whispered, "You used to clean this floor?" Jacqueline didn't miss a beat. "No," she said. "I used to listen to it. Now it listens to me." 3 weeks later, Jacqueline stood alone in the elevator, floor 1 to 68. No tray this time, no uniform, just her. In a slate gray blazer, pressed trousers, and a lanyard that read, "Executive Access." Her reflection in the elevator doors looked back at her like an old friend she finally recognized. Same eyes, same hands, same heart, but a new center of gravity. And outside the elevator, a company that didn't know what to do with her, so they had no choice but to follow. Her new office overlooked the skyline like it owed her something. And maybe it did. She didn't redecorate, didn't frame degrees or hang quotes about grit or ambition. Instead, on her shelf sat a single object, a folded gray cleaning cloth. Washed, pressed, framed in glass. because she never wanted to forget where the silence started and where she broke it. They began to notice it. At meetings, she didn't speak first. She let the others fill the space with rehearsed pitches, fake confidence, and half-truths. Then she'd speak and change the direction of the room with one sentence. It wasn't magic, it was clarity, because she had learned something the hard way. When you're invisible long enough, you learn how to see everything. One day, a young intern knocked on her door. Nervous. Early 20s. White. Male. Tie too tight. "I was told to shadow you today," he said. She nodded. He paused. Can I ask something?" "You just did." He smiled awkwardly. "What's the one thing I should know? Working here?" Jacqueline leaned back, looked out the window, then back at him. "You don't rise by pleasing the room," she said. "You rise by being the only one who understood what the room was really saying." He didn't get it. Not yet. But she smiled anyway. That night, alone in her office, she reviewed a list of upcoming hires. She paused on a name: a janitor, immigrant, fluent in 2 languages. Quiet record. She circled it, made a note. Invite to language strategy session, 4th floor, no uniform. Because maybe, just maybe, this was how it started again. Not with a speech, but with a chair being pulled out for someone who was never expected to sit at the table. She didn't ask for power, she earned clarity, and clarity is louder than power ever was.